A guy that I have to mention that I really had fun playing with, White Chocolate in Miami.
Oh.
White Chocolate was nice to play with. Because
really?
I could just put my hand up like that and the ball be right
and he
there
knew where,
time.
you know what?
Every time.
Jason Williams would never.
Shout out to White Chocolate.
Right. Yes. He would never get the credit that's due as one of those point guards, but he was definitely flash of his time, and he definitely was one of the premier guards of his time. So shout to J-Dub out there.
He was selling out gyms in high school and continued his dazzling play in college. But bad decisions and difficulty complying with team and NCAA regulations led to his college career being cut short. Most times, this would lead to a player falling in the draft, but Jason Williams was still a high pick. And once he got to the NBA, he showed fans that he was just as much of an entertainer as he was a competitor. Of course, winning was most important, but every game saw Williams use his incredible court vision and second-to-none handles to carve up the defense, penetrate through the lane, and find the open man with a ridiculous pass. His ability to put the same zip and accuracy on his passes, whether he used his right or left hand, made him so dangerous. And his rainbow threes or smooth-looking pull-ups were another fan favorite. The only problem was that these look great when they work, but when they don't, you become hated. And Williams had plenty of plays where they didn't work, and plenty of stat lines filled with missed shots and turnovers early in his career. But as his career went on, certain stops and certain coaches helped him mature and grow as a player to become one of the best floor generals in the league, while retaining some of his trademark flashy play. He was never really able to become an efficient shooter, but as the years went on, he routinely had one of the best assist-to-turnover ratios, which led to him helping the Grizzlies to some franchise firsts, and then doing the same for the Miami Heat as the starting point guard on their 06 title team. His career would slowly decline after this, and injuries would catch up to him, but overall he would be an above-average starter for a decade in the NBA. He wasn't the perfect player on or off the court, but there's very few who have brought the same entertainment value or reached the level of popularity that Jason White Chocolate Williams did. So let's jog your memory and take a deeper dive into his career. A West Virginia native, Jason Williams played basketball for DuPont High School. Williams was a varsity starter as early as his freshman year. He would go on to be a starter for all 4 years, while being the first and only player in DuPont history to accumulate 1,000 points and 500 assists in their career. His senior year was his best, as he averaged 18 points and 10 assists per game, while leading the Panthers to the state championship game as a senior in 1994, where they would lose to Martinsburg, as Williams put up 17 points, 11 assists, and 9 rebounds. But he would end his senior season by being voted Virginia's Mr. Basketball. Yet the most interesting part of Williams' high school career is that he spent nearly all of it playing with a future Hall of Famer, but not in basketball. Yeah, that guy right there, that's Hall of Fame wide receiver Randy Moss, who not only dominated on the football field, but was also one of the best basketball players in the state. But now it was time for Williams to go to college, and he had originally committed to Providence, as he felt connected with coach Rick Barnes. But when Barnes left for Clemson, Williams would get out of his letter of intent, so he would then enroll at Fork Union Military Academy, but he would last just 3 days there. Once he left, his father suggested local Marshall University, which was in Virginia, and after meeting with head coach Billy Donovan, Williams committed to play for the Thundering Herd. Williams would redshirt the 95 season before joining the team as a redshirt freshman for the 96 season. He would be one of 2 players on the team to play and start in all 28 games this year. He would finish 4th on the team in scoring, yet his incredible passing vision was on display, as he led the team and the conference in total assists and assists per game, while also leading the team in steals per game and finishing 4th in the conference. Although Marshall had a top 3 scoring offense in the nation, their defense was bottom 10, but this would still result in a 16-10 regular season finish. However, they would lose to Davidson in the conference tournament semifinal, and due to this, would not get an invite to the tournament. But for the regular season, Williams would average about 13.5 points, 6.5 assists, and 2 steals per game. After this year, Donovan would take a job as head coach of the Florida Gators, and Williams didn't want to lose a coach he connected with twice, so he would decide to follow Donovan to Florida. Due to being a transfer, Williams had to sit out the 97 season, but he was back and ready for the 98 season. But even though Williams had some great moments with the Gators, his season would be cut short. Williams was without a doubt the most talented player on the team, and would play as such, as he would lead the team in scoring, assists, and steals, and was on pace to finish first in the conference in both assists and steals per game, but wouldn't be credited due to the reason for his season ending early. Williams and the Gators started the year 5-0, and by January 16th were 8-5, but he had been benched for a January 10th game versus Georgia, then wouldn't start their January 14th game versus Arkansas, So on the 16th, it was announced that Willliams was suspended for undisclosed reasons, which ended up being for marijuana use. He would come back and play his best college game on February 1st, when he had 24 points in an upset of eventual national champion Kentucky at Rupp Arena. But reportedly, right after the game, Willliams smelled like weed, which would lead to another drug test, and eventually, on February 18th, it was announced that Willliams would be suspended indefinitely and dismissed from the team for his marijuana use, as Florida would lose their final 4 games of the regular season after the Willliams suspension, and they would miss the tournament. But in the 20 games Willliams played, he averaged about 17 points, 6.5 assists, and 2.5 steals per game. So with his college career in jeopardy, Willliams turned his focus to the 1998 NBA draft. Willliams' talent was undeniable, but his marijuana offenses left a cloud lingering over his head. And especially at this point in time, these offenses in college could be the difference between the first round, the second round, or even undrafted. But to a lot of people's surprise, although Willliams wasn't attending the draft, he wouldn't be waiting long to hear his name called from home.
With the 7th pick in the 1998 NBA draft, the Sacramento Kings select Jason Williams from the University of Florida.
Williams was selected 7th overall by the Sacramento Kings, and it didn't look like David Stern was too impressed with this pick. But the Kings were trying to make a splash after decades of mediocrity. They had acquired all-star big man Chris Webber shortly after the 98 season, and with the extended offseason brought on by the lockout, they had signed big man Vlade Divac in late January and welcomed their draft pick from a couple years earlier in Peja Stojakovic. So the flashy Williams would have a lot of weapons to work with, as he was handed the keys to the offense as soon as he was drafted. Williams and Webber had instant chemistry, and with a coach like Rick Adelman, who allowed Williams to play on a long leash, he could truly be himself in the offense. And Adelman would go as far as to compare the flair that Williams brought to the game with a former teammate of his in New Orleans, named Pete Maravich. Although his shot selection was quite suspect, and some of his flashy pass attempts could go sailing out of bounds, the possibility of these becoming highlight plays is what made J. Will. Williams would play and start in all 50 games this year, and with him running the offense, the Kings operated at the fastest pace in the league, which translated into the league's best scoring offense, but their defense was non-existent, finishing dead last in points allowed. Williams would hit double figures in 44 games, record 6 games with double-digit assists, and 5 double-doubles, as he would even finish in the league's top 20 in assists and steals per game. But he would also finish in the top 20 for total turnovers, with 143. But among rookies, Williams was 5th in scoring, 1st in assists, and his 95 total steals would lead all rookies. He would be named first team All-Rookie, but would finish second to Vince Carter for Rookie of the Year. And although he wasn't considered the best rookie, he was arguably the most popular rookie and one of the league's most popular players, as he was a nightly highlight reel, but didn't need to play above the rim to do so, as number 55 Kings jerseys were popping up everywhere, and he was given his famous nickname of White Chocolate by a member of the Sacramento Kings PR department named Stephanie Shepard. But I'll let Williams explain it in his words.
That's right. And the nickname White Chocolate. Where'd that come from?
Man, I think it's somebody in Sacramento in the PR department gave it to me.
Really?
Yeah.
And it just stuck, right?
It did. You know, I mean, it didn't bother me at all, you know. I look at the game, you know, once you go in between the lines, all the white, black, all that's out the door. You can hoop, you can hoop.
So the Kings were one of the most exciting teams in the league, and were trending in the right direction. They were sitting at 17-22 with only a few weeks left in the season, but would go on to win 10 of their final 11 to finish the season at 27-23 and earn a playoff berth versus the Utah Jazz. The young Kings would push the veteran Jazz the distance, and would even go up 2-1. But Utah's experience proved the difference maker, as they would win the series 3-2. Williams would have double figures in each of the first 3 games, with his best game coming in Game 2, when he had 18 points on 60% shooting with 3 assists and 2 steals. But this would be the only game that Williams shot above 39%, and with the Kings only needing 1 win to advance, he would score 9 combined points across games 4 and 5, while going 1 for 6 from the field in both games. But Williams' rookie season would end with him averaging about 13 points, 6 assists, and 2 steals per game. 2000 was much of the same for the Kings, as they would once again play at the fastest pace while scoring the most points, but allow the 3rd most points in the league. Williams was again the starting point guard, but after a very poor shooting season as a rookie, he would be even less efficient this year, shooting below 38% from the field and 29% from deep, as he attempted 505 threes this year. But he would still finish tied with Divac for 2nd on the team in scoring, and would again lead the team in assists, as he would again finish top 20 in the league in this category. He would hit double figures in 49 games, have 18 games with at least 10 assists, and 11 double-doubles, which included his career high of 18 assists to go along with 18 points in a January 4th win versus Cleveland. But with the flashy passes came a lot of turnovers, as his 296 turnovers were a career high and the third most in the league. But this season was still full of highlights for Willliams. Yet the play that would arguably become his most famous highlight wouldn't even be converted.
This is from the corner. And we're going to check the score.
During the rookie-sophomore game during All-Star Weekend, Willliams left fans in awe with the elbow pass to Rafe LaFrentz, which he unfortunately was not able to convert. The Kings still had some things they needed to clean up, but with Webber playing at a near MVP level, they were able to go 44-38 and make another trip to the playoffs, where this time they would play a motivated Lakers team led by Shaq and Kobe. And although this series would again go the distance, the Kings would again end up on the losing end. Willliams came out strong with 20 points and 3 assists on 50% shooting in a Game 1 loss, but would then have just 9 points and 1 assist in a Game 2 blowout. The Kings would win the next 2 to even the series, but would be blown out in Game 5, as after the first 2 games, Willliams' play dropped off, as he averaged less than 8 points and 3 assists on about 30% shooting. And for the regular season, Willliams averaged about 12.5 points, 7.5 assists, and 1.5 steals per game. Willliams had been in the media spotlight since he arrived in the NBA, and with good attention and praise comes the same amount of, or oftentimes more, negative attention and criticism, as Willliams' weaknesses were really starting to be magnified by the media, specifically his inconsistency and inefficiency. And it really didn't help when it was announced that Willliams would be suspended for the first 5 games of the 0-1 season after failing to comply with treatment obligations under the league's anti-drug program, which was presumed to be due to marijuana use, as the league had just added marijuana to its banned substance list before the 99-2000 season. But nonetheless, Willliams was back as the Kings' starting point guard in year 3, yet his role had been slightly reduced. Over the offseason, the Kings had brought in some more pieces, such as Doug Christie, Hedo Turkoglu, and Bobby Jackson. And Jackson especially would eat into Williams' playing time, as although Willliams was still the starter, he was receiving about 5 less minutes per game than he had received over his first 2 years. And it would be reflected in his output, as his numbers dropped across the board, but his efficiency had gone up. He was taking 3 less shots per game, but was shooting over 40% from the field and over 31% from deep. And his turnovers also dropped to about 2 per game, after nearly 4 per game last year. He would hit double figures in 37 games, would have 4 games with double-digit assists, and 2 double-doubles on the year. And the Kings were a much deeper and much improved team, and now are one of the top teams in the league, behind the second fastest and highest scoring offense and a much improved scoring defense, as they would finish 55-27 and take on Phoenix in the first round. Willliams would have a great series, as he was able to remain quite efficient throughout. The Kings would lose Game 1 as Willliams put up 10 points and 5 assists on about 45% shooting, but they would win Game 2, as Willliams had 18 points and 3 assists on over 63% shooting, which he would follow up with 14 points on over 55% shooting in a Game 3 win. The Kings would win Game 4 and the series, as Willliams cooled off with 7 points on 3 of 8 shooting, although he would only get about 19 minutes of playing time. Round 2 brought a rematch with the Lakers, but this series would be a disaster for Willliams. He played well in Game 1 with 14 points and 4 assists on 5 of 8 shooting, but would commit 6 turnovers as the Kings lost. But then after this, Willliams would score just 7 points on a combined 2 of 16 shooting, with 7 turnovers and 7 assists across games 2 through 4, as he would get a major minutes decrease. All of these games would end in Lakers wins as they swept the Kings, but for the regular season, Willliams averaged about 9.5 points, 5.5 assists, and a steal per game. But the relationship between Willliams and the Kings had been deteriorating. As dynamic as Willliams was, the Kings were reportedly growing tired of his erratic play, but also erratic behavior, such as his early season suspension, but also an incident that happened in late February, where Willliams had allegedly said some racially charged comments to Asian Warriors fans during a game, which would end up getting Willliams a $15,000 fine. But Willliams also was unhappy. He understandably didn't like his decreasing minutes, which led to him questioning his importance to the team, and he would eventually imply that he would welcome a trade. So on draft day 2001, Willliams was part of a package sent to the newly relocated Memphis Grizzlies, for a package headlined by their young point guard, Mike Bibby. Willliams would join a Grizzlies team who were looking for a fresh start after a terrible 6 years in Vancouver. On top of trading Bibby, they had also traded the best player in franchise history up to that point in Sharif Abdur-Rahim, and their inaugural draft pick Bryant Reeves would be forced to retire before ever playing a regular season game with Memphis. But there was some promise with Willliams coming in alongside a solid center in Lorenzen Wright, who came over in the Abdur-Rahim trade. But more exciting were the two rookies the team was bringing in, which were a small forward out of Duke named Shane Battier and a 21-year-old 7-footer out of Spain named Pau Gasol, who had been part of the Abdur-Rahim trade. Willliams would play in 65 games this year due to various injuries, including missing 8 games late February and early March after an ingrown toenail surgery. But Willliams was getting nearly 35 minutes per game and would finish as the team's second leading scorer on a career-high 14.8 points per game, which would include his single-game career high of 38 on over 57% from the field with 6 made threes in a November 30th win versus Houston. Yet overall, his shooting had once again dipped to below 39%, while going less than 30% from beyond the arc. But that wouldn't deter him from shooting from long range, as he put up 433 point attempts. On top of his improved scoring, he would average a then career-high 8 assists per game, as he would have 22 games with double-digit assists and 18 double-doubles, and finish ranked in the top 10 in assists per game. But it was still a Grizzlies team basically starting from scratch, and because of this, would still be one of the worst teams in the league, finishing at 23-59 and missing the playoffs. But Willliams' first season in Memphis would see him average about 15 points, 8 assists, and 1.5 steals per game. The 03 season would begin with the same core in place, but the team started terribly. After 8 games, they were winless, and head coach Sidney Lowe resigned. So new GM Jerry West had to act fast, and would coax Hubie Brown, who had been retired since 1987, into coming on as head coach. But the Brown hiring would turn out to have an incredible impact on Willliams' career. Up to this point, Willliams had coaches who gave him freedom to do what he wanted, but never really got in his face when he made a dumb play. But that's not how the old school Brown operated. He had no problem letting Willliams hear it whenever he made an ill-advised play. And with Williams' father Terry being a former state trooper, this was likely how he was disciplined as a child. And as Willliams would say in regard to Brown's in-your-face style, he loved it, as it made him feel like he had a coach who actually cared about him and wanted to see him improve. And although Willliams still kept his trademark flair, he was starting to play like a more traditional point guard and looked a lot more under control, as he averaged over a turnover less per game, and although his overall shooting was about the same, he improved to shoot over 35% from deep. His scoring dropped to about 12 points per game, yet he still had 52 games in double figures, and he would again lead the team in assists, this time with a career-high 8.3 per game, which would also see him finish second in the league to Jason Kidd, with him recording 25 games with at least 10 assists and 20 double-doubles. The team would still have some growing pains under Brown, but they would go 28-46 during Brown's time there to finish at 28-54 and miss the playoffs. Yet their 28 wins would still be a franchise record. And another silver lining of this year was a mid-season move at the trade deadline between Orlando and Memphis, which saw Memphis send a package headlined by rookie Drew Gooden to the Magic for a package headlined by former Rookie of the Year Mike Miller. But for the regular season, Willliams averaged about 12 points, 8.5 assists, and a steal per game. The Grizzlies would add a couple more pieces in the offseason, as they would sign free agent forward James Posey, and then orchestrate a trade with Portland early in the 04 season to acquire Bonzi Wells. And just like that, the Grizzlies had everything they needed for a franchise turnaround. A much deeper team with a great backup point guard in Earl Watson saw Williams' minutes reduce slightly, but he was still the starter. And although his production was down, his efficiency was rising. He would shoot over 40% for the second time in his career, and would also shoot 33% from deep, while averaging less than 2 turnovers per game and still finishing top 10 in the league in assists per game. He would hit double figures in 43 games and record 14 double-doubles. But a full offseason with Hubie Brown at the helm had a young Grizzlies team playing like seasoned veterans. It would take some time, as they were sitting at 17-18 after 35 games, but they would then go on an 8-game win streak right before the All-Star break and would go 13-2 in the month of March. And when the season came to an end, the Grizzlies not only had their first winning season in franchise history, they had their first 50-win season, and their 50-32 record would get them a first-round playoff matchup with San Antonio. But a lack of playoff experience was evident, as the Spurs would make quick work of Memphis in a 4-game sweep. And it didn't help that Willliams struggled all series. He would average about 11 points for the series, recording 3 games in double figures. But he shot below 33% from the field and 29% from deep, while also only recording 1 game with over 4 assists. But it was still major progress for Memphis. And for the regular season, Willliams averaged about 11 points, 7 assists, and 1.5 steals per game. The Grizzlies looked ready for a repeat season, as they were bringing back virtually the same team, but Gasol would struggle with an ankle injury and only managed 56 games this year. Yet more importantly, the Grizzlies had a coaching carousel this season. Brown unexpectedly retired 12 games into the year on November 25th, citing health reasons. The Grizzlies were sitting at 5-7 at the time of his retirement and would then go 0-4 under assistant coach Lionel Hollins, before Mike Fratello would take over for the rest of the year. Williams' numbers again had dipped slightly, but his minutes dipped slightly as well. He was still the starter, but getting less than 28 minutes per game. Yet he continued with his more efficient play. He would shoot a then career high 41.3% from the field and over 32% from deep, while again averaging less than 2 turnovers per game. He would hit double figures in 35 games and would have 5 games with double-digit assists. But these Grizzlies were a different team under Fratello. After routinely having a pace in the top third of the league during Williams' time there, they would be bottom 5 this year, as they weren't scoring nearly as much, but now featured a top 5 scoring defense, as they would go 40-26 after Fratello took over to finish at 47-35, and this time get a first-round matchup versus league MVP Steve Nash and the Phoenix Suns. But like last year, the Grizzlies would be swept quite convincingly, yet Williams would finally have a great postseason series. In the 4 games, Williams would have double figures in all 4 of them, including 2 with at least 20, as he averaged 17 points for the series, but more importantly, did so on nearly 53% from the field and over 47% from deep, while also dishing out over 5 assists per game and averaging a steal and a half. But the Suns' high-powered offense was just too much, and for the regular season, Williams averaged about 10 points, 5.5 assists, and a steal per game. Out east, the Miami Heat had just made a trip to the Eastern Conference Finals, behind their new duo of Dwyane Wade and Shaquille O'Neal, but they would come up short versus Detroit, and it was clear that they lacked depth. So in early August, a massive 4-team, 13-player deal was agreed upon, which would see Jason Williams shipped to South Beach. So the Heat were definitely title favorites. They already featured Wade, Shaq, Alonzo Mourning, and Udonis Haslem, and along with Williams, had acquired James Posey and Antoine Walker in the same trade, and on top of that, would sign Gary Payton to split the point guard duties with Williams. But the Heat would have a disappointing start, as they were sitting at just 11-10 on December 12th, but then head coach Stan Van Gundy would resign, and team president Pat Riley would take over. But as Riley would say after the season, he was worried he didn't get the player he thought he was getting in Williams. With Williams trying to find his fit, he was passing everything, which is good, but he wasn't playing the style that made him so unique, utilizing his elite handles and slashing ability to collapse the defense before finding the open man. And the 2 guys that Williams was really trying to get involved, in Shaq and Wade, were even telling him just to be himself and be aggressive. So over time, Williams was looking like his old self. He was putting up his lowest assist totals of his career, but his 12.3 points per game would be 3rd on the team, and he would do so on a then career high 44.2% from the field and 37.2% from deep, as he would have 37 games in double figures and 1 double-double. But the Payton signing proved very useful, as even though Williams was the team's starter, he would deal with a knee injury all year, which limited him to just 59 games. The Heat would go 38-21 with Williams in the lineup, and overall would go 41-20 under Riley, as they were able to finish the year with a 52-30 record and get a first-round matchup with Chicago, as they were about to make history. It was a tale of 2 Williams in the 6-game series, as the first 3 games would see Williams average over 18.5 points and nearly 4 assists on over 55% shooting. But the final 3 games would see him average 2 points and 4 assists on a combined 2 of 20 shooting. The Heat would go up 2-0 before Chicago evened it, but Miami would lock in and win the next 2 convincingly to advance to a second-round matchup versus New Jersey. Williams would be a bit better this series, but still have his ups and downs, as he would record at least 12 points in games 1, 2, and 5, but would only shoot about 36%. But then games 3 and 4 would see him score a combined 10 points on 2 of 13 shooting, while recording 1 game with at least 5 assists. The Nets would steal game 1 before Miami would win 4 straight to take the series and get a conference finals rematch with Detroit. Williams would continue his up and down play, as in the first 4 games, he would record just 1 game in double figures when he had 10 points in game 1, but would then score 7 points or less in the next 4 games, including going scoreless in game 4, while averaging less than 4 assists. However, it wasn't so much efficiency as it was him just not taking a lot of shots. But with a trip to the finals on the line, Williams had his best playoff performance ever in game 6. Williams would record 6 assists in the game, but he also couldn't miss. Over the course of the game, he would go 10 of 12 from the field, which included him making 10 consecutive shots to start the game and not recording his first miss until the fourth quarter, as he finished with 21 points, and the Heat won to advance to their first finals appearance in franchise history. Willliams would again start the series well, as he would go for 12 points and 4 assists on about 45% shooting in Game 1, followed by 11 points and 4 assists on 30% shooting in Game 2, as the Heat had lost both and were now in an 0-2 hole. Willliams would go for 12 points and 3 assists on about 45% shooting in a Game 3 win, yet the rest of the series he would fail to crack double figures and would shoot above 20% just one more time. But as a distributor, he was playing great, as he averaged nearly 6 assists and just over 1 turnover in games 3 through 6. And that's all he needed to do, with Wade putting together one of the greatest 4-game stretches of all time, as the Heat came back from 2 down to win 4 straight and secure the first title in franchise history. As an up-and-down career, which saw Willliams grow and mature as a player and person, had gotten him to the top of the mountain as a starting point guard on a championship team, but his regular season saw him average about 12.5 points, 5 assists, and a steal per game. However, Miami's attempt at a repeat the next year would not go as hoped, as the team was decimated by injuries. Shaq would undergo knee surgery to repair torn cartilage very early in the season, and right around the time he returned, Wade would be lost for 31 games due to a shoulder injury, as a 34-year-old O'Neal had to be the offensive focal point of the team. And Willliams wasn't able to escape the injury bug either, as he would miss 21 games. However, he would remain the starter and would again finish third on the team in scoring. His efficiency had dropped, but it was still one of his more efficient seasons, shooting over 41% from the field and nearly 34% from deep. He would still record 33 games in double figures and 4 double-doubles, but with all the injuries, the defending champs were struggling, as they were sitting at 27-29 on February 26th. Luckily, they would string together a 9-game win streak and overall would go 17-9 the rest of the way to end the year at 44-38, which would be enough to get them a first-round matchup with Chicago. But calling this series a disappointment for Miami would be an understatement. The Bulls would get incredible performances out of Ben Gordon and Luol Deng, but Wade's shoulder still wasn't at 100%, and although Shaq was efficient, he wasn't the same scoring machine that he once was. But the biggest disappointment was Willliams. The Heat would lose in an embarrassing 4-game sweep, as Willliams scored more than 5 points just once and failed to crack double figures the whole series, as he also averaged less than 4 assists. But he just couldn't buy a bucket, as he would shoot 25% from the field for the series, while going 5 of 17 from deep. And for the regular season, Willliams averaged about 11 points, 5.5 assists, and a steal per game. 2008 would be further regression for Miami. The Heat would be one of the worst and most dysfunctional teams in the league this year. Guys like Gary Payton, Antoine Walker, and James Posey were gone, and Shaq was dealing with injuries and a diminished role in the offense. And reportedly, Pat Riley had been questioning Shaq's injury and suggesting that he wasn't fully committed to the rehab process. But in a season full of disagreements, the tipping point occurred in an early February practice, when Willliams showed up 10 minutes late, which led to Riley laying into him. And when Shaq stood up for him, Riley sent both players home, but instead, Shaq and Riley would get in each other's faces and need to be separated. And shortly after this, Shaq was sent to Phoenix for Sean Marion. Williams' play had been further declining, as he would appear in 67 games, but would average a career low in points and assists up to that point, while once again shooting below 39%. And near the end of the year, he had lost his starting spot. And Wade had also been hampered by a knee injury this season. So with the Heat sporting the league's worst record at 11-50, Wade would be shut down for the final 21 games of the year, as overall they would finish at a league worst 15-67. And for the regular season, Willliams averaged about 9 points, 4.5 assists, and a steal per game. Willliams was a free agent and would sign with the Clippers prior to the 09 season, but about a month and a half later, before the season started, Willliams would announce his retirement due to injuries. But hold on, around the midway point of the 09 season, Willliams announced he would be attempting an NBA comeback, and come August, he would sign with the defending Eastern Conference champion Orlando Magic to play under his brief coach in Miami, Stan Van Gundy. Willliams would play backup to Jameer Nelson, as he appeared in all 82 games for the first and only time in his career, and would even start in 18 of them. But his reduced role was perfect for a player at this stage in his career, as he would shoot a career-high 44.4% from the field and 38% from deep, and only commit about 1 turnover per game. On top of Nelson, the Magic featured superstar center Dwight Howard and forward Rashard Lewis, and it also picked up Vince Carter in the offseason. The Magic were a dominant team, as they finished with a 59-23 record and would play the Charlotte Bobcats in round 1. Willliams would have a limited role, recording just 4 total points and 2 assists in a Magic sweep, but he would provide solid minutes off the bench all postseason. Round 2 would end in a sweep of the Hawks, with Willliams playing great in the closeout game, as he had 6 points and 4 assists on 50% shooting. The conference finals brought the Boston Celtics, and this series would go 6 games, but the Magic would not get the victory. Willliams would again provide solid minutes, as he would record 4 games with 5 points, including 5 points and 5 assists in Game 5. But this marked the end of Orlando's season, as Willliams averaged about 6 points, 3.5 assists, and half a steal per game. Willliams would undergo arthroscopic surgery about a month and a half before the 2011 season, but would still be available for the season opener. However, injuries led to him playing sporadically to begin the year, and then on December 18th, the Magic acquired Gilbert Arenas. And after this trade, Willliams could no longer crack the rotation. He would request his release, which would be granted on January 26th. Then a couple weeks later, he would return to a familiar place when he signed with Memphis. Unfortunately, Willliams was only able to appear in 11 games, as he would then miss the final 17 games of the year with back soreness for a 46-36 Grizzlies team who would lose to the Thunder in the Western Conference semis. And for Williams' overall regular season, he would average about 2 points, 2 assists, and half a steal per game. Willliams would announce his second retirement after the season, but this time it was for good. He would briefly appear in the Big Three in later years, but would injure his knee in his first game. Jason Williams was an icon, and early in his rookie year, he became one of the league's most popular and most polarizing players. He played the game with a flashiness that hadn't been seen since Magic Johnson or his constant comparison of Pete Maravich. He wowed fans in Sacramento, but was given full freedom. And as good as that was from an entertainment perspective, it wasn't really going to translate to winning. When he got to Memphis, it seemed like more of the same, until Hubie Brown came in and held him accountable, which led to Williams playing with more maturity and control, yet still giving the fans a show when the flow of the game allowed it. By the time he got to Miami, he was a veteran point guard, playing the position with poise and leadership, and it translated to a championship. But after that, his career hit the decline, and Miami as a whole became a dysfunctional team. He was able to put together a great year as a backup for Orlando before injuries forced him to hang them up. But he still played 12 years and was a starter for a decade. And that's impressive regardless. But Williams was an anomaly, and a player that went against the grain of what a squeaky clean league was trying to embody. But no matter what people said or what criticism he received, he never changed who he was. And even though he had his weaknesses, he possessed a one-of-a-kind game and earned the respect of everyone around him throughout his career. But that's it for today's episode on J. Will. Hope you enjoyed it, and make sure to subscribe for more videos like this one. If you liked it, check out this one on the player he was traded for early in his career, or this one on another player who brought the street ball style of play to the NBA. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.